I've been wanting to make this video for a while now. I'm not too familiar with creating YouTube content myself, however, I, like most, definitely consume a lot of it, and I wanted to start sharing my thoughts and experiences about how the digital nomad life feels. I think it's valuable for many people to know before they take the leap that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and I'm sure you've heard that before. Currently, I'm now approaching my fourth full month of solo long-term travel here in Indonesia, and there's a lot that's been on my mind, and I've been wanting to talk about the real realities of what this life looks like for a young Westerner like myself. As time goes on, more and more young people in the West are becoming disillusioned and fed up with how life has deteriorated for the average person. And so I just wanted to make a video perhaps directed toward the younger, less experienced version of myself, the one who'd been dreaming of living this lifestyle for years before being able to finally take the leap. And now that I've managed to pull it off, it's been great so far, and I'm glad I made the decision to move to come out here. However, there's many things I had to figure out the hard way, things which nobody really talks about online, and that's what I want to dive into with full transparency. Now, starting with money and cost of living, because this is where many people get it wrong completely. The whole Southeast Asia is so cheap thing is only true if you do it right. And so many people, including myself, last year would book short-term stays in hotels or hostels, Airbnbs, etc., in places like Bangkok, Phuket, or the south of Bali. And the prices, they're not very different from the West, depending on where you stay, especially when you're paying the daily rate at a hotel, for example. Honestly, I found that the hotels and Airbnbs I stayed at during my first solo travel stint in 2025, so last year, my first ever time being in East Asia, they weren't very impressive, these hotels. It's also quite expensive, to be honest. And so now that I've had some experience, I've learned to communicate directly with landlords at different accommodations I find through local rental websites. So in Indonesia, for instance, a website such as Rumah123, it's quite decent to find apartments, and when you reach out to landlords, you can negotiate a decent monthly rent just for a few months in a studio or one bed as a solo traveler. And that would save you so much more, considering the fact that the average apartment in the West, a one bedroom or a studio in many big cities especially, could be upwards of, in London, £2,000 a month. Jakarta, many places you can rent a decent apartment on a 1 or 3 month contract for around £200-300 a month. So, and it's also quite good as well. They're not horrible places, so the savings are much more. And as what most other digital nomad types do, who are successful, they'll often as well, they won't stay in the same hotels or Airbnbs as most other travelers. They're probably staying in high-end villas and apartments rented long-term or monthly, or even longer-term contracts, maybe even potentially purchasing, more so as leasehold, not freehold. This is where you truly get to take advantage of the lower cost of living. Now that I've started opting for longer term contracts, I can now say that if done correctly, that famous benchmark of $1,000 per month cost of living, or even less than that, is quite easy to achieve with a bit of careful planning and discipline. Of course, also being mindful of drinking and partying / drug and dating habits. These will be very expensive, pretty much your largest expense if you're not careful, and falling into the common traps. So more on this probably in a further video. But of course, food is cheaper as well overall. However, there's still very expensive options out here as well, and this can drain your budget if you indulge too much. Basically, everything in moderation, and also I've realized it's probably best to just cut alcohol completely, as it's a massive expense when traveling and obviously not good for you either. Again, more on this in a further video. Something I had to learn the hard way is that the distractions and lack of structure here are so prevalent that you need to have some sort of structure and discipline before you even arrive anywhere in Southeast Asia. I learned this when I first came out to Southeast Asia in 2025. I thought a big reason why I wasn't as productive was because I was getting distracted or demotivated and held back by family and friends back home, and that the freedom of being out in Southeast Asia would give me the unlimited time and superhuman motivation or discipline to really lock in and achieve my goals. However, in hindsight, I realized these were only theories based on stuff I'd seen online, and it wasn't until I experienced it for myself that I now see the truth. No matter where you go in the world, you do not instantly change and become a better person with enhanced abilities. You're the same person in Thailand as you would be back home, except now you have access to even cheaper alcohol, parties, prostitutes, and everything else. You still need discipline, you still need routine and knowledge or experience in whatever country you're in. This, of course, only comes with time after making mistakes and learning from them, or perhaps having guidance from someone who's been there and done that. Knowing how to find accommodation, food, gyms, workspaces, and all that stuff is very valuable when it comes to staying anywhere long term. And knowing this has made me realize that during my first travel stint in 2025, I really was just a kid without a clue. It wasn't until I returned to the UK that I knew I needed to establish some structure. I rented a shared office space at a Regis location near my area, and I committed to the same routine each and every day. It was really boring, but honestly it worked, and it made me realize that although it's much more expensive and less free, the West is actually a decent place to work and establish yourself professionally before making a decision to relocate. It's common online to see videos where people say this exact same thing, or maybe even some who had a completely different experience, and they moved to Thailand with just a couple $1,000s and no income, and then managed to make it work somehow. But definitely I believe it can be possible. However, if you want to give yourself the highest chance of success, I believe it's best to arrive with good discipline, a routine to stick to, instead of only a dream and limited skills or good habits. I didn't really understand this until I experienced it for myself. Now that I'm back out here on a long-term basis, I realize that balancing work and travel is difficult, almost impossible, if you want to remain ultra productive. It can be monotonous and draining to work in the same environments every day, like your apartment, or maybe the same cafe or same co-working space every day. It can feel quite meaningless if you're in a new country wanting to travel, but instead you choose to shut yourself off from any new experience in the name of productivity. This is a trap I fall into as well, so instead I've created a habit out of seeking good workspaces wherever I go, whether that be cafes, restaurants, or even a traditional co-working space, like mentioned before. I've gotten quite good at finding cafes in any area I'm in, which are suitable as a workspace. That means decent Wi-Fi, comfortable seats, good coffee, maybe also good food options, and also quiet enough with AC, preferably for a comfortable working environment. At first, these may be difficult to find depending on where you are staying, but there are some tricks I've developed to make it easier to find. Many nice cafes, which are suitable as workspaces, are often clustered around university areas. So especially here in Indonesia, for example, if you want to get an idea for how well a cafe might work as a workspace, then looking at the photos to verify presence of AC and comfortable seating. Also power outlets. The reviews may also mention these things like this place has fast Wi-Fi or good for work from cafe or many power outlets for the laptop, etc. It can definitely feel more lonely or isolating if I just remain at the apartment all day. So I like to go out, explore new areas and find these nice cafes. But honestly, in the beginning it will feel difficult or near impossible to focus and be productive. But I think it's just a matter of adaptation and building routines into your new environment. The next topic being diet. The diet can be a problem, especially for me when I first arrived, especially in a more local or traditional Southeast Asian city like Jakarta. The cleanliness standards and food hygiene is much different than the West, so there can be issues with your stomach not being accustomed to these bacteria in the kitchens. It took me around, I'd say, 2-3 months to normalize and have my stomach get used to the bacteria. From that point, it's just about listening to your gut and avoiding places which aggravate any sort of digestive problems or that don't agree with you personally. Now, I don't want to pay with my health in exchange for cheap food as well, so at the end of the day, we all know that health is the most valuable thing. So I also try to opt for healthier options where I can, which means less fried food, less sugar. I pretty much only drink black coffee and always ask for plain iced tea or less sugar in my drinks. Here in Southeast Asia, they seem to love sugar syrups, whether you're in Thailand or Malaysia or Indonesia. They love their palm sugar syrup, their condensed milk syrups, and also many others. So it's always best, at least for me, to ask for less sugar. It's funny when I forget to ask for less sugar. I get the drink I ordered and it tastes like pure sugar. It's nearly unpalatable because it's probably I've never let myself get accustomed to that level of sugar. So yeah, many of the locals seem to love it, but I think overall it's just not healthy to have so much sugar every day. And also with the fried food, it's not the best to have fried food every single day. Also, not forgetting the multivitamins and trying to incorporate fresh fruit, hitting the gym, walking around more. I like to walk around a lot, especially since the weather's nice all throughout the year, except when it's raining, rather than calling taxis everywhere, which can be tempting since they're very affordable and very convenient. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is one of the most important things, I think. It's something that a lot of young Westerners deal with before making this decision. The constant fear-mongering from parents and older family members. It was not as common for our parents to go to these places for extended periods, so they really have very little real knowledge about what to expect. They almost all immediately default to any one of those catastrophes they've heard online, whether it be some news article or some social media post about getting drugged or getting kidnapped, killed, having your organs stolen. Those stories that went viral recently or in the past year of those young travelers being poisoned by the methanol alcohol, the bootleg alcohol, and they ended up passing away from it. These things definitely have happened in Southeast Asia in the past decades. However, you can find many examples from news stories which obviously have very exaggerated clickbait headlines to make Southeast Asia seem as unsafe and uncivilized as possible. But in reality, it still only represents a very small percentage of the tens of millions of foreign tourists who come annually to Southeast Asia. Basically, anyone who's visited anywhere in Southeast Asia is just a normal, good, law-abiding person, not trying to sell drugs, not breaking the law, not pissing off the wrong people or getting involved with the wrong people. They'll realize that most places within most countries in Southeast Asia are much safer than many places in the West, especially the large cities, which we've seen massive crime increases and homicide rate increases. The older generation, like our parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, they may have the best intentions and only want us to be safe, but the fact is they do not really understand the reality, as they've most likely never been here unless it was for a short vacation, and that doesn't really equate to actually living here long term. Most commonly, they just go off of what they see from people, the news, or social media, and this causes a distorted view of what really happens in the country. So it's important to know that the first-hand experience is the most important thing, and you shouldn't get carried away by what everyone says if they've not actually been there firsthand. The final thing I want to address is where you actually choose to base yourself, because this makes a massive difference to your whole experience. You see all these places advertised heavily online, especially parts of Thailand and Vietnam, along with, of course, Bali in Indonesia. Around half of all tourists arriving in Indonesia are concentrated in pretty much just the south of Bali, which would include places in and around Canggu, Seminyak, Uluwatu, and maybe other areas within Bali if they're feeling more adventurous. Outside of Bali and maybe the islands off the coast of Bali, and also the Gili Islands off the coast of Lombok, are quite touristy. Gili T is one of them as well, a well-known party island. All these places are very touristy, and so you're not going to really feel that exotic or that unique. But if you go further out, like where I am currently, the most populous island, which is called Java, It's outside of the thin strip of archipelago which everyone goes to in Indonesia. You see maybe tenth of the amount of foreigners or even less. I've now spent almost 4 months traveling only here in Java, starting with Jakarta, where there were definitely some foreigners, but it was a completely different crowd. More older and mature travelers, some even working in Jakarta. Definitely not surprised to see no groups of young Europeans or Australians looking to get drunk and party, which is, you see that a lot in Bali, especially in Canggu. Where I'm now at, here in central Java, in Bandung, there's even fewer foreigners. I've seen a few walking around, but there's even less than Jakarta. And this is another reason why it's so affordable for me here. There's no absurd Western tourist scam pricing. And you basically see this kind of these pricing tactics and these scams, tourist scams, operating in many of the tourist hotspots across Southeast Asia. And just being somewhere where there's very few tourists, like Western tourists, it's a lot easier to live for much less and actually enjoy life, as opposed to always having to worry about whether the person's trying to get money out of you, which it can still happen anywhere you go, but it's just less common here. There's local people living a normal life for the most part. The Indonesian people themselves are very friendly and welcoming toward English speakers. It's quite common to have Indonesians coming up to you, all ages, old and young, asking where I'm from, why I'm here, and of course wanting to practice their English a little bit. It's quite different from Thailand, where obviously since tourism is so rampant there, even though Thai people are very friendly and respectful, I'll definitely admit that. At the end of the day, you're nothing really that unique or special to them. They've seen people like you a million times over, especially in places like Bangkok and Phuket and Koh Samui. However, in Indonesia, especially outside of Bali, the Indonesians just don't see foreigners, so you're much more exotic. And of course, it does happen in Thailand as well. I would say maybe if you go up north or further out into where it's just Thai people, maybe there you would get more smiles, more genuine curiosity. But for the most part, yeah, Thailand, very rampant tourism. And so, in conclusion, I think it's best to, instead of going off of what your favorite influencer is saying about where's the best place to travel as a nomad, you should just visit every country, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and other East Asian or Southeast Asian countries, and then make a decision based on what you saw yourself. So now that you have the first-hand experience, like I spoke of before, you can now make a decision based on what you've actually seen instead of what you've seen online. And I think that's very important to do, because only when you do that will you really be able to live properly in life in general, but also with traveling. Like, you don't want to be stuck in the tourist hellholes. You want to really experience what life is like in a different country, and not just in the tourist districts where everyone talks English and where everyone, maybe there's many Germans and you're German, or there's many English people and you're also from England. It takes you out of your comfort zone to be somewhere different and actually experiencing life in a unique way. And then, not to mention as well, this will come with the aforementioned savings in cost of living. By living somewhere where there's no tourist economy and everyone's local, the prices are of course lower than in the main tourist hubs of Thailand, and you also get the chance to learn the local language. Here in Indonesia, for example, the language is very simple, and many people, foreigners, do learn it just from living here long term. But for countries like Thailand or Vietnam, the language is much harder, so that's one more thing to keep in mind. Everything I've talked about comes back to two things. So the first thing is that the digital nomad life, long-term travel life, is very alluring for many Westerners, and it genuinely seems amazing on the surface. But there are hidden challenges that you'll face and need to overcome. Second thing is that very little of what you've seen online, whether that be news, social media, what your friends and family have told you, or what some travel influencers posted can prepare you for life out here. Most people only really know what they've seen and experienced firsthand, or in the case of social media, it could be a certain narrative that they're trying to push to get you to make a certain decision or think a certain way. And so in the end, coming out here and actually living a life firsthand has shown me this in a way that nothing else could. If you're thinking about making the move, definitely do it, but go in with your eyes open, test a few countries out first, and don't go in based on what you've seen online from influencers, and especially not from fantasies you've constructed in your own mind to escape your life in the West.